Cop says he smells weed. Your heart rate spikes. The lights are still flashing in your mirror. Your mind starts racing through everything in your car, everything you said, everything you're about to say. What happens in the next few minutes can decide whether this stop ends with a warning and you driving away, or ends with your car pulled apart on the side of the road, while people drive past staring. Here's what actually helps, step by step in plain language. First, let's understand why this moment feels so heavy. When an officer says, "I smell marijuana," that phrase carries legal weight. In a lot of states, the smell of marijuana by itself has been treated as enough to give an officer probable cause to search a vehicle. That's changing in some places as more states legalize or decriminalize marijuana, but the rules are different depending on where you are. Some states still treat smell as enough on its own. Others require more than just a smell. Because of that, you can't control what the officer says or does next, but you can control how you respond. That response is what protects you. Let's go through the 5 things that matter most. Some states still treat smell as enough on its own. Others require more than just a smell. Because of that, you can't control what the officer says or does next, but you can control how you respond. That response is what protects you. Let's go through the 5 things that matter most. Move 1 is to stay calm and take care of the basic stuff first. This sounds simple, but it's the foundation for everything else. When the lights come on behind you, pull over as soon as it's safe. Turn off your engine. Roll your window down enough to talk and hand things through. Put your hands on the steering wheel where they can be seen. If it's nighttime, turn on your interior light so the officer can see you clearly. These small actions matter because officers are trained to watch for sudden movements reaching toward the floor, glove box, or center console, because those are the places people keep weapons. You are not trying to look suspicious, and you're not trying to look scared either. You're just trying to look calm and cooperative on the surface level things. When the officer asks for your license, registration, and insurance, hand them over. This is not the moment to start asserting your rights by refusing basic paperwork. Refusing to hand over identification during a traffic stop can actually get you arrested in most states because you are legally required to provide it when lawfully stopped while driving. So separate in your mind the difference between things you must do, like identify yourself and provide your documents, and things you don't have to do, like consent to a search or answer personal questions. Confusing those 2 categories is one of the most common mistakes people make. They either comply with everything, including things they don't have to, they either comply with everything, including things they don't have to, or they refuse everything, including things they're legally required to do. And that second option often makes the situation worse and can lead to an arrest for obstruction, even if the underlying stop and that second option often makes the situation worse and can lead to an arrest for obstruction, even if the underlying stop was completely legal. So, step 1 is simple. Be polite. Keep your hands visible. Hand over what's required. Speak in a normal, respectful tone. None of this is you giving up any rights. It's just you not giving the officer any extra reason to escalate things. Move 2 is learning to ask one specific question and knowing why it matters. That question is, am I being detained or am I free to go? This might feel like a strange thing to ask a police officer, almost confrontational, but it's actually one of the most useful things you can say, and it's completely legal to ask. Here's why it matters. A traffic stop is supposed to be limited in time and scope. The officer pulled you over for a reason, whether that's a broken taillight, speeding, or something else. Once that original reason for the stop has been addressed, meaning the officer has your documents, has run your information, and the initial purpose of the stop is basically done, the stop is supposed to end unless the officer has a new reason to keep you there. Something like smelling marijuana, seeing something in plain view, or other suspicious behavior. Seeing something in plain view or other suspicious behavior can be used to extend the stop. By asking whether you're being detained or free to go, you force the situation to become clear. If the officer says you're free to go, you say thank you and you leave calmly, without arguing or trying to prove a point. If the officer says you are being detained, now you know for certain that this has become a real investigative stop, not just a routine traffic stop, and you can adjust how you respond, staying quiet and careful with what you say next. A lot of people never ask this question, and stops drag on for much longer than they need to, with officers asking question after question, searching for a reason to search the car while the driver just sits there answering everything without realizing they could have asked to leave. Asking this question doesn't guarantee you'll be let go, especially if the officer has already decided there's probable cause to detain you further, but it forces clarity, and clarity is protection. It also creates a clean record, especially if you're recording, showing that you specifically asked and were told you were being detained, which becomes important later if you need to challenge the stop in court. Move 3 is understanding that you do not have to consent to a search of your car, and knowing exactly how to say that. Here's how this usually plays out. The officer says something like, "I smell marijuana in the vehicle," and then either directly or indirectly asks permission to search. It might sound like, "Mind if I take a look inside?" Or, "Why don't you step out so I can check the car really quick?" This is the moment where a lot of people panic and just say, "Okay," either because they're scared, because they think refusing will look suspicious, or because they don't realize they're allowed to say no. You are allowed to say no, clearly, calmly, one time. Something like, "I do not consent to a search of my vehicle." That's it. You don't need to explain why. You don't need to argue about whether they can actually smell anything. You don't need to get into a debate about the law with the person holding a badge on the side of the road. Say it once, stay polite, and let it go. Now here's the important part to understand. Saying you don't consent doesn't automatically stop the search from happening. If the officer believes they already have probable cause, meaning a legal reason that doesn't depend on your permission, they can search anyway. The smell of marijuana, something visible in plain view like a pipe or a baggie, or a drug-sniffing dog alerting on the car, can all be used as probable cause in many places, independent of whether you consented. So refusing consent is not a magic shield that stops a search from happening in the moment. What it does do is preserve your rights for later. The smell of marijuana, something visible in plain view like a pipe or a baggie, or a drug-sniffing dog alerting on the car, can all be used as probable cause in many places, independent of whether you consented. So refusing consent is not a magic shield that stops a search from happening in the moment. What it does do is preserve your rights for later. If the search does happen, and it turns out the officer didn't actually have valid probable cause, the fact that you clearly stated you did not consent becomes very important. It can be the difference between evidence being allowed in court and evidence being thrown out, because a search that wasn't consented to and wasn't backed by real probable cause can be challenged as unconstitutional. If you had said yes, you go ahead, that consent alone can be used to justify the search regardless of whether there was any other legal basis. So even though refusing consent might not stop what happens on the roadside that day, it protects the legal path forward if things go further. One more thing about this. If you are ordered to step out of the vehicle, you should do that. Officers are allowed to ask you to exit the car during a stop for safety reasons, and this has been upheld by courts. Stepping out of the car is different from consenting to a search. You can comply with an order to exit the vehicle while still clearly saying you don't consent to your vehicle being searched. Move 4 is about your right to remain silent and knowing how to actually use it in a way that doesn't make things worse. During a traffic stop, officers will often ask questions that go beyond the reason for the stop. Things like, "Where are you coming from? Where are you headed? Whose car is this? Have you had anything to drink tonight? Is there anything illegal in the car I should know about?" These questions can feel casual, almost like small talk, but they're not just small talk. They're often designed to get you talking, to see if your answers seem nervous, or inconsistent, or to get you to accidentally admit something that gives them more legal justification to search or detain you further. You are not required to answer these kinds of questions. The Fifth Amendment protects you from being forced to say things that could be used against you. You can say something like, "I'd like to remain silent, and I'd like to speak to a lawyer." You can say it politely. You don't have to say it in a hostile or defensive tone. Something like, "Officer, I'm going to stay quiet until I can talk to a lawyer, but I'm not trying to be difficult." That tone matters. The words matter for your legal protection, but the tone matters for how the interaction actually goes. A lot of people think staying silent looks guilty, so they end up talking more than they should, trying to explain themselves, trying to be extra friendly, trying to talk their way out of a situation. But talking too much is one of the most common ways people accidentally give officers more information than they had before, information that can be used to justify longer detention or a search. You don't have to fill silence. Silence is not an admission of anything, it's a right. It's worth knowing that you do have to answer basic identifying questions in some states, if asked directly, like your name, in what's sometimes called a stop and identify situation. But this is different from a general traffic stop where you've already provided your license. For most everyday traffic stops, once you've handed over your documents, you are not required to keep answering personal questions about where you're going or what you've been doing. Move 5 is about recording the interaction and remembering details, because in the moment things happen fast, and afterward, details are what matter most if you need to explain what happened or challenge something in court. If it's safe to do so, and depending on your state's laws, you're often allowed to record a traffic stop, either with your phone propped up somewhere visible or by simply stating out loud that you are recording. Recording isn't about trying to catch the officer doing something wrong. It's about having an accurate record of what was actually said and done, because memories can be unreliable or shaped by adrenaline later on. Even without a camera running, you can train yourself to notice key things: the time of the stop, the officer's badge number and name, which are usually visible on a nameplate or can be asked for politely, the patrol car number, the specific words used, especially anything like, "I smell marijuana," or "I have probable cause," because those exact phrases can matter a lot later. If there were passengers in the car, what they saw and heard matters too, and it can help to compare notes afterward. If the stop ends without an arrest, write down what happened as soon as you can. If the stop leads to an arrest or a search, everything should go through a lawyer. Anything you remember, wrote down, or recorded becomes useful information. Now let's talk about why all 5 of these things work together. None of them are meant to be used alone. Staying calm and handling the basic stuff first keeps the situation from escalating. Asking whether you're detained or free to go creates clarity. Refusing to consent to a search protects your legal position if a search happens. Staying silent keeps you from accidentally handing over information. And recording details gives you and any lawyer something solid to work with. None of this is about being rude or trying to provoke a confrontation. The calmer and more respectful you are while stating these things, the better it goes. Officers respond to tone as much as words. You can be firm and still be polite. Saying, "I do not consent to a search," officer, in a steady voice, is key. The words protect your legal rights. The tone protects the interaction itself. Remember that none of these things guarantee a specific outcome. What they do is protect your position, both in the moment and afterward. If everything is legitimate, staying calm usually means the stop ends simply. If something does escalate, everything you did right becomes critical evidence. The bottom line is this: staying quiet isn't the same as guilt. Asking a clear question isn't the same as being difficult. Politely refusing a search isn't the same as having something to hide. These are rights that exist precisely for moments like this. Knowing exactly what to say and how to say it is what gives you confidence.